After the end of the War for Southern Independence and Reconstruction, the North and the South came to a tacit or gentleman's agreement by which the South would support the new government. It's called a North-South bargain. Now, post-war, the people of the South had two choices. They could initiate a revolt or they could remain loyal. Now, by revolting, they could refuse to accept the new government foisted upon the South by the conquerors. They could use every means possible, including violence, to reject the legitimacy of the new government. And they could act mainly the way the Irish did in fighting off the English oppression. The Irish had numerous revolts time and time again until they finally, a couple of centuries later, gained their independence. But the South chose another track. They decided to remain loyal. We accepted the fact that the constitutional republic of sovereign states, as established originally by the founding fathers, no longer existed. We accepted the newly created supreme federal government that was created by Lincoln and the post-war Republican Party. Now, our acceptance does not mean that we freely and voluntarily consented to this new government. Because remember, consent made under compulsion is void of legitimacy. But as a tactic for somehow gaining a semblance of normality, the South decided to remain loyal. This was a bargain. In exchange for the South's tacit agreement never again to raise the issue of secession or real states' rights, which includes the states' right of nullification and secession, and the South's support for the United States military in all future wars, the supreme federal government would allow the South the semblance of local self-government and join the South in honoring our Confederate veterans. Post-war, the South kept its end of the bargain, even though recent opinion polls demonstrate that close to 50% of Southerners believe that they would be better off politically, socially, and economically if their state seceded from the USA. Despite this, to date, there's never been a political movement aimed at secession. Despite its unequal treatment in the new government, the South has remained loyal to the nation. Southerners have eagerly served in the U.S. military in every war since Appomattox. Former Confederate General Joe Wheeler served in the Spanish-American War. Sons of Confederate veterans served in World War I. Grandsons of Confederate veterans served in World War II. And the record continues for the descendants of Confederate veterans through all of our wars. Now, initially, the federal government kept its end of the bargain, at least up until the 1990s. Congress, for instance, recognized Confederate veterans as American veterans. The U.S. Postal Service issued numerous stamps and with images of Confederate veterans. Even Congress endorsed the minting of a Confederate memorial coin, a 50-cent piece, back in 1925. And also the military. The U.S. military named tanks and ships in honor of Confederate officers. President Eisenhower kept a framed photograph of General Robert E. Lee in his office while he was serving as President of the United States. He wrote that General Lee was an honorable man who did his duty and should be an example for all. It was a time when the South was allowed to define and celebrate its unique history and heritage. Now, the federal government has broken this North-South agreement. Republicans in Congress voted with liberal Democrats to remove Southern symbols from the U.S. Capitol. Republicans in Congress voted with liberal Democrats to remove names of U.S. military bases named for Confederate officers. The U.S. military declares pro-Southern political ideas as offensive and prohibits the display of any traditional Southern symbols. National, state, and local officials of both national political parties endorse or passively allow the destruction of ancient monuments raised to memorialize Confederate veterans. Daniel Webster, and I paraphrase Daniel Webster of Massachusetts, but he told us that a bargain broken by one party is no longer binding on the other party. What will be the ultimate impact on this nation because the federal government broke the North-South bargain?